While big esports genres like FPSs and MOBAs often hold most gaming media attention, and smaller titles like the ones we talk about on this channel have their own dedicated fan bases, there exists a third category somewhere in between, where it's not exactly a small scene like an obscure fighting game, but not exactly a behemoth like League of Legends or CSGO. Of course, if you've read the title, you know we're talking about car racing esports, a genre that has existed since pretty much the start of gaming. Car racing esports have always existed in some form since the whole concept of racing is inherently competitive, but only recently have they started to scale up their events to be in a form that we are much more familiar with. Last year, an event happened where the digital racing world and the real racing world collided in a way that changed how we think about both. This is the time esports saved Formula 1. While racing simulation esports have been around for a while, they never really got the same prestige and glamour that MOBAs and FPSs have traditionally had. The main competitive racing games have been Forza Horizon, Formula 1, and Trackmania, with a bunch of smaller games that have their own scenes like Mario Kart. The Formula 1 series of games have been released in yearly installments since the early 2000s, primarily developed by Codemasters, who developed many popular racing games that you probably know of. In late 2017, Formula 1 finally got an officially supported esports series that had fairly decent viewership numbers, with over 20.5 million impressions total across all digital platforms. The video of the finals was viewed 6 million times across all platforms, and those 6 million viewers saw Brandon Lay of the United Kingdom as its first champion.
The first ever F1 esports champion. He's shaking his head. I think he's a bit stressed. You should be happy because today you were amazing.
Due to the success of the event, Formula 1 and their esports partner, Gfinity, decided to continue their esports series with a full season the following year in 2018, but this time with a twist. The first stage of the season in April had something called the Pro Draft. In this Pro Draft, from 66,000 participants in the online series, the top 40 drivers were eligible for selection by actual Formula 1 teams for their esports division. That's right, brands like Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Alfa Romeo were picking out players to drive for them in virtual racing. The prize pool was a whopping $200,000, and the series drew a record audience of 5.5 million concurrent viewers across streams and certain TV networks. In the end, Mercedes won the 2018 World Championship, headed by Brandon Lay, who repeated to become the two-time driver champion. The inclusion of real F1 teams in the mix legitimized the whole event, further blurring the lines between digital and real-life racing. The following year, in 2019, a third esports series was undertaken, with the already huge prize pool increasing yet again to 500,000. This time around, Ferrari opted to join in on the event, the last piece of the puzzle for every single F1 team to be a part of the esports vision. The decision proved fruitful when the series was won by David Tunizza, an up-and-comer who is actually involved with Ferrari's Driver Academy. While these events were showcasing F1 esports to have great potential on top of providing a path for official car makers to get into esports, it was in 2020 that the lanes merged and digital and real racing found themselves on a collision course. In March of 2020, COVID-19 had a huge impact on the regular Formula 1 racing season, among other things. Most of the season's events were cancelled, and F1 was looking for alternatives to provide their fans entertainment in the meantime. Formula 1, Codemasters, and Gfinity realized they already had the perfect thing. The end of March saw the launch of the virtual Grand Prix, which was to be televised in place of regular racing events that had been cancelled due to the pandemic. While it would have been easy enough to just further televise the regular esports season, F1 saw an opportunity to try and attract the larger F1 audience. The idea? Real F1 racers, some of whom had already been playing car sims for quite some time, were invited to participate. What made the events even more entertaining is that a lot of these F1 drivers were pretty formidable competition in the esports races, while on the flip side, some hadn't even played any of the video games until the tournament was announced. One of these racers was George Russell, a British racing driver that made a point to train just as hard for the esports event as he would for any real-life race, even asking esports pros for tips and advice. Russell said, quote, "It's been great. It's kept us busy, kept us entertained, that's for sure. And it's kept the competitive side of us busy and interested. We don't have racing to go out and do at the moment, and having this opportunity to race against all of us, our mates, it's been great fun along the way. Although George Russell picked up sim racing very recently, he actually went on to win the Spanish, Monaco, Azerbaijan, and Canadian Grand Prix, 4 consecutive races. Russell was living proof that perhaps real-life skills are sometimes transferable. The event was a hit with fans of both worlds, which is surely due to the fact that the F1 games have gotten pretty darn close to the real thing. Some of the press surrounding the event started discussing the possibility of an esports first player becoming a real F1 racer down the line, since the reverse was already happening. George Russell had this to say on the matter. The biggest difference is you don't have quite the sense of speed or fear. Obviously, when you drive at around 200 miles per hour around a track, you know that if you make a mistake, you can be in the wall and there can be big consequences. Whereas on a computer game, you can hit restart and you go again. Sure, real-life racing might be a bit more than the strategy and turning, but for many esports first competitors, F1 esports is their ticket into the franchise. Danny Berezne, an esports F1 driver for Alfa Romeo, is ranked in the world's top 3 esports F1 drivers and has beaten real-life F1 titans like Lando Norris, Nico Hülkenberg, and Nicholas Latifi in virtual tournaments. Talking to BBC, he said, quote, "Ever since I was 7 years old and I started to watch Formula 1, I wanted to be connected to the sport somehow. Esports is that pathway for me." The virtual Grand Prix garnered 21.8 million views on digital platforms alone, with TV viewership at over 5 million across 100 countries. Later in the year, F1 racing would resume in regular capacity, and the regular esports series would continue as well, this time increasing the prize pool yet again to $750,000, and breaking viewership records yet again with 11.4 million livestream views across all platforms. While some diehard fans might consider virtual F1 to not be comparable to the real thing, this event and the numbers it pulls in show that the competition and skill of racing is very much real and present in F1 esports. In 2021, the virtual Grand Prix returned with a different format, but kept the mix of esports players and real-life pros, and in all likelihood, this will be the standard format. In our changing world, the convenience of digital events is too great, and since the virtual version is slowly becoming more and more comparable to the real thing, it may simply become an alternative rather than a downgrade. What are your thoughts on F1 racing? Is it nice to see someone other than Lewis Hamilton winning every single race? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Jason B, Brendan QB, David Foxy Iron, Lyra Mauve, Sierra Shampoo, Weeaboo Spartacus, and Yashichi for being platinum supporters. And an extra special shout out to Steven, Noodles, Marco, Mookie, and Orioriol for being diamond supporters. We'd also like to extend an extra special shout out to Fool from the Art of Warfare for being our Grandmaster supporter. Your continued support is much appreciated. If you also want to support our channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below or join our Discord server. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.